The sea is calm, but tension crackles in the air in a deadly embrace. On one side, the Carthaginians, masters of the sea, experienced sailors whose warships glide like predators across the waves. On the other, the Romans, land-born warriors, brilliant on the battlefield, but awkward at sea. By every calculation, Rome should lose. And yet, with one brutal twist of engineering genius, the tides of history shift. This is the story of a weapon that turned clumsy farmers turned sailors into masters of the Mediterranean. A weapon so simple, yet so devastating, that it rewrote the rules of naval warfare. Forgotten by many, but once feared by all, it was known as the corvus, the boarding bridge that made Rome's navy unstoppable. What happens when a land empire invents a way to fight at sea as if it were on land? That question reshaped the ancient world. For centuries, Rome's strength lay in its legions. On land, Roman discipline, tactics, and sheer determination crushed enemies from Italy to the Alps. But when Rome set its sights on expansion beyond the peninsula, it ran into an obstacle more dangerous than any army: Carthage. Carthage, the jewel of North Africa, was a maritime superpower. Its navy ruled the Mediterranean like a colossus, its sailors bred from birth to command the waves. Rome, by contrast, had almost no naval tradition. The Romans farmed, marched, and built roads, but the sea was alien to them. So, when the First Punic War erupted in 264 BCE, Rome found itself at a fatal disadvantage. It could not fight Carthage on the water. And yet Rome, being Rome, refused to accept defeat. They built ships, hundreds of them, copying Carthaginian designs. But ships were not enough. Training sailors took decades, and Rome had no time. If they fought the Carthaginians at sea in the traditional way, they would lose. They needed a weapon that could erase Carthage's greatest advantage. And so, from desperation, was born the corvus.
The rise of the corvus. The corvus was brutally simple. Imagine a wooden boarding bridge about 36 feet long and 4 feet wide, fixed to the prow of a Roman ship. At its tip hung a heavy iron spike shaped like a beak. When a Roman ship drew alongside its enemy, the corvus was dropped with a crash onto the opposing deck, the spike driving deep into the wood. The two ships were now locked together. Suddenly, the sea battle was no longer about maneuvering or ramming. It became a land battle on floating platforms. And on land, or in this case, on planks of timber above churning seas, the Romans were invincible. The first great test came at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE. Rome, green at sea, faced a Carthaginian fleet. The Carthaginians were confident, circling the Romans like sharks. But when the first enemy ship closed in, the Romans dropped the corvus. With a crash, the ships locked. Roman soldiers stormed across, their shields gleaming, their swords flashing. The Carthaginians, expecting a naval duel, instead faced legionaries in close combat. One by one, ships fell. That day, Rome captured or destroyed over 50 Carthaginian vessels. The sea, once Carthage's unchallenged domain, had been bloodied by Roman steel. The peak of influence. Over the next decade, the corvus turned the tide of the First Punic War. At the Battle of Cape Ecnomus in 256 BCE, Rome deployed one of the largest fleets the ancient world had ever seen. Again, the corvus proved decisive. Carthaginian ships tried to outmaneuver the Romans, but the moment they came close, they were ensnared, boarded, and overwhelmed by legionaries. The corvus made Rome's navy not just competent, but terrifying. Carthaginian captains began to dread the moment when the wooden bridge crashed down, sealing their fate. The Mediterranean, once a Carthaginian lake, became a battleground where Rome could finally stand on equal footing. In a sense, the corvus was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of Roman pragmatism. Rome did not try to become sailors overnight. They turned the sea into land. They transformed naval battles into infantry fights, and in doing so, they rewrote the script of ancient warfare. At its peak, the corvus gave Rome near-total dominance. With every victory, their confidence grew. The weapon became so feared that even the sight of the boarding bridges rising over Roman prows could shatter enemy morale. But, like all weapons, the corvus had its flaws. Heavy and cumbersome, the device made ships unstable. In calm seas, it was devastating. In storms, it was deadly, sometimes to its own users. Roman fleets carrying corvi suffered massive losses when rough waters capsized the overloaded ships. Over time, Rome adapted. Its sailors grew more experienced, its admirals more skilled. The legions no longer needed the crutch of the corvus to win at sea. Gradually, the weapon faded from use, remembered as a brutal but temporary advantage. By the later stages of the Punic Wars, Rome had abandoned it. The tool that had carried them to naval supremacy was quietly set aside. And history, with its love for grand battles and heroic names, often forgot it.
Yet the shadow of the corvus lingers. In a sense, it was the ancestor of all naval boarding tactics. Pirates, privateers, and even early modern navies used variations of grappling and boarding to bring land combat to the waves. The Roman corvus was the blueprint. Its spirit lives on in military innovation itself, the idea of reshaping the battlefield to your strengths rather than fighting on your enemy's terms. It is the embodiment of Rome's genius, not perfection in every field, but relentless adaptation. Today, you can still find references to it in museums, history books, and even in strategy games where a wooden bridge with an iron spike reminds players how ingenuity can conquer empires. And so we ask, was the corvus just a stopgap solution, or was it one of the great turning points in history? Without it, would Rome have survived the First Punic War? Would Carthage have remained the master of the Mediterranean, altering the course of Europe forever? The corvus was not elegant, it was not glamorous, but it was effective. And in war, effectiveness is everything. This forgotten weapon turned farmers into sailors, soldiers into marines, and Rome from a landlocked power into the ruler of the Mediterranean. It is a reminder that sometimes the simplest inventions, born from desperation, can alter the destiny of nations. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden weapons of history, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe for more tales of forgotten battles, weapons, and empires. Because history is not just about kings and conquests, it's about the tools, the ideas, and the innovations that changed everything. The corvus was one of them, and though the sea has long since swallowed its timbers, its legacy still echoes across the waves.